Thanks for joining me today. Gary Zacharias here with the Apologist bookshelf. I have done, I think, 2 previous podcasts on this book. It's called Stand Firm, subtitled Apologetics and the Brilliance of the Gospel. Paul Gould, Travis Dickinson, and R. Keith Lofton are the authors. By the way, I wonder what that's like to try to have 3 people write a book. I guess you would maybe spread out the work, huh? Must be kind of tough, though. Well, Tim McGrew, who's chairman of the Department of Philosophy at Western Michigan, said the authors take pains to show their readers how Christianity is both good and beautiful, to make skeptics wish that it were true, and then to show them that it is. And I think that's just an excellent way to go about apologetics, and that is to tell people what Christianity offers, right, rather than saying it's true. Start with what are some of the great things that it offers, and then you say, let's look at it. Those are very good things, so let's look at it and see if it is true. If it's true, then it'll offer those things. So anyway, I like that. That's a good approach. So I want to look at chapter 4 on miracles. It starts by, I like the way it starts. In 1980, the Soviet Union and the Americans are playing a men's hockey game at the Winter Olympics. You know, the Russian team was just full of professionals. I mean, that's all they did for a living. And the American team was a bunch of college kids. Nobody gave them a chance at all. The Soviet team was heavily favored. And yet the American team won. And at the end of the game, one announcer said, "Do you believe in miracles?" "Yes." The game has been known ever since as the Miracle on Ice. They said, okay, so we call it a miracle. Some people do, but he said that may be overusing the term. He said contemporary culture labels all sorts of things, whether it's like this, a sports victory or winning the lottery or even getting a good parking place where you want to shop. We call those miracles, but that's not really what Christianity means and what it's talking about when it talks about the supernatural. So, excuse me, think about things like the creation of the cosmos, the virgin birth of Jesus, the resurrection of Jesus. I mean, these are miracles, and they're touchstones of the Christian faith, aren't they? And the Gospels over and over give us to believe that performing miracles was actually a big part of the earthly ministry of Jesus. I mean, think about the raising of Lazarus from the dead. My wife and I just recently watched The Chosen, and it was the episode dealing with the resurrection. The bringing back Lazarus from the dead. I guess it was a resurrection. And pretty amazing. Just a powerful scene. So the role of miracles in Christianity is one of its key features. One philosopher said this: in most other religions, miracles are merely an added attraction, because only the teaching of that religion is what's centrally important. But Christianity is founded on the miraculous event of Christ's resurrection. It's based not just on the teachings of Christ, but what he did. And Paul, remember Paul in 1 Corinthians 15? He says, if Christ has not been raised, then our proclamation is in in vain, and so is your faith. Wow. So Paul says basically it all hinges on the resurrection. But here we are. We're living in a post-Enlightenment culture, and it pretty much has decided it's going to reject any supernatural sense of miracles. So the key question then is, can a rational person today believe in supernatural miracles, especially now that we have so much scientific knowledge? And so it starts the chapter then, after this intro, with trying to define what a miracle is. Voltaire said a miracle is the violation of mathematical, divine, immutable, eternal laws. Okay, so that key word violation is going to come back. In fact, they say that biblical understanding of a miracle doesn't have anything to do with violating the laws of nature. The miracles in the Bible lie somehow beyond the laws of nature. So then they have to take up, of course, the question of what's a law of nature? Well, that's a generalized description of how things normally happen. There's the key phrase, normally happen in the world. Right? So each law of nature describes the way things normally operate, assuming that there are no outside factors that interfere. Now, a miracle, right? So we talk about a miracle. So the natural order somehow has been interfered with. So a supernatural cause has been introduced into the natural order. So they said, take the resurrection of Jesus. as an example. Now, he returns to life. That doesn't refute or deny the laws of nature, that bodies break down and that, dust to dust. But it's an acknowledgement in this instant a supernatural cause was added to the equation. So it's not a violation of the laws of nature. What's a miracle? It's an event performed by God beyond the ability of the natural order. And I think that's a good way to put it. I've heard somebody put it this way, that if you take a vase and it's sitting up on a shelf someplace and somebody accidentally knocks it and it falls to the ground, gravity takes over, doesn't it? And you'll see gravity in action. Boom, there it goes, and it lands on the ground and shatters. But what if the vase is knocked accidentally and it starts down because gravity is operating, but somebody grabs it at the last second and it doesn't shatter? What have they done? They have intervened. They have gotten something outside of nature to come in and make that stop. And so gravity continued to work. If you let go of that vase, it's still going to fall. So it's not a violation at all. Well, we've got a section here coming up next. I think is a little harder, makes your head spin a little bit, but it's talking about David Hume. Now, he's a Scottish philosopher back in the first half of the 1700s. And a lot of people think he was the one that really shattered the whole idea of belief in miracles. Now, he wasn't an atheist. He was, I guess, what you call a deist. So he believed God existed, but he didn't do anything as far as the human race, kind of got the ball rolling and then headed off and did whatever gods do when they have spare time. So he thought that the idea that God would supernaturally perform some kind of miracle, that was a superstitious delusion. Those are his words. And he wrote an essay called Of Miracles. And there comes the big thing, right? That people today say, oh, that's a check on all sorts of superstitious delusions. Now, he didn't argue. What's interesting to me, Hume doesn't argue that miracles are impossible, right? He said there may be miracles. But here's his strategy. It's pretty subtle. He argues we can't have grounds for believing a miracle has occurred, right? We can't come up with that conclusion. So he says, first thing you do is a wise man, he says, this is Hume talking now, proportions his belief to the evidence, right? So how do you test things? Experience, says Hume, is our only guide in reasoning concerning matters of fact. So if our experience renders a conclusion certain, we have a proof. But if our experience, the evidence that we have, is weaker, then all we can say is maybe a probability is out there. So here's what he's saying. Just imagine a mental scale. So you've got evidence on one side for some issue, and you've got evidence on the other side against an issue. So you place on one side of the scale all the evidence in favor of a miracle, and then any opposing evidence goes on the other side. So with these two things in mind, let's take a look at two parts of what Hume is going to argue. Something called the in-principle argument. That's first. And we'll get to the other one in just a second. It's called the in-fact argument. But here's the in-principle argument. He says, we can't, now he is still Hume now, he's saying that we can't, even in principle, have enough evidence to believe that a miracle has occurred. He says, you just can't, there's not enough. A miracle is a violation of the laws. And so he said, here we go, here comes that scale. On one side is the testimony in favor of the miracle. On the other side is evidence against it. And what we see is evidence against a miracle. We see it all the time. We see gravity. We see light coming from the sun. I mean, all these kinds of things. So Hume thinks that the uniform experience that we have, this evidence from all people, all times, that say the laws of nature don't fail, that's way more powerful than any evidence in favor of a miracle could ever be. So that's in principle. So there's not more evidence on the side to argue for a miracle, so you must refrain, if you're wise, from believing any miracle occurs. Now here comes his second argument. It's a lot simpler. So if that one was a little confusing, this is a lot easier. So in the second argument, he tells us, in fact, the evidence for miracles is not that great. It's not great at all. Why? He's got 4 reasons. So let me read the 4, and I'm going to go back over the 4. So 1, no miracle has ever been vouched for by enough honest and educated people. Number 2, people naturally want to believe in the miraculous, and so they're suckers. Now, that's not Hume's word, that's my word. 3, alleged miracles only occur among primitive people, and they don't lack credibility. They do lack credibility. And number 4, all religions have miracle claims which conflict with one another. They cancel each other out because they have contradictory doctrines. So there are the 4. So let me just mention something that the book doesn't get into. Alleged miracles only occur among primitive people. I mean, that's such a put down, isn't it, that Hume is saying? So you discount anything coming from anywhere in the world, right? Because they're primitive people. I think that's a racist thing that he's talking about there. And people naturally want to believe in the miraculous, so they'll believe anything, that we're all suckers. Really, I don't buy that either. And number 1, no miracle's ever been vouched for by enough honest and educated people. Interesting. I wonder what he means by enough. If you had 5 people that saw something, is that enough? 10? 20? I have a feeling that Hume would say it's never enough. But anyway, so there are the 4. Okay, so one more time. No miracle's ever been vouched for by honest and educated people, enough of them. Number 2, people are suckers. They want to believe it. 3, the miracles are only occurring among the primitive people. Number 4, all religions have miracle claims, so that cancels everybody out. So the authors of this book, that's Gould and Dickinson and Lofton, take a look at that case that he's built against miracles. So they start off acknowledging, they say, yeah, Hume's right. We should be hesitant to believe a person who claims to have seen a miracle. But says, notice that Hume doesn't say anything about whether we can know via direct observation that a miracle has occurred. Okay, so he said, in other words, all of Hume's arguments, all he establishes is that if I observe a miracle, then I should expect other people to be skeptical when I tell them. But just because others are skeptical of something that I'm claiming, does it follow I should doubt myself? No. If a crime has been committed and there's evidence that suggests I'm guilty, should I doubt my own innocence if I know I'm innocent? Of course not. So Hume gives no reason for people to doubt their own direct observations. A greater problem, though, they say, is that his argument commits a logical fallacy called begging the question. So remember, Hume says a miracle is a violation of the laws of nature. Well, if it's a violation, then he's assuming no miracle has ever occurred, to prove that no miracle has ever occurred. That's funny. I mean, C.S. Lewis says it this way. We must agree with Hume that if there's absolutely uniform experience against miracles, if, in other words, miracles have never happened, then they've never happened. Here's the biggest difficulty they see. They said the third and final difficulty. None of his 4 accusations call into question the occurrence of any particular miracle. So he says, sure, I mean, the 4 things he says we should be worried about should make us cautious, but they don't yield a conclusion that some miracle account is automatically bogus. They said, what about his 4th charge in particular, that you have these competing religious claims? He said, that's just false. Christianity is not only the sole religion founded on the supernatural miracle of a dying and rising Savior, it's the only religion that hinges its whole credibility on that single miracle claim. So it's not that other religions say the same thing about their religious leaders. Okay, let's go to the second half of the chapter, and it'll be a little faster, but they're going to take on something in the area of science now. What does science have to say about miracles? So they quote Richard Dawkins, scientific beliefs are supported by evidence, and they get results. Myths and faiths are not and do not. So notice what Dawkins is saying. On one hand, you get science that operates according to evidence. On the other hand, you get Christianity and Peter Pan and the Easter Bunny, right? They're divorced from evidence. And one person, Alex Rosenberg, chair of the philosophy department at Duke University, says, we trust science as the only way to acquire knowledge. That's why we're so confident about atheism. So do you hear what he's saying? Science is the only place that you can get knowledge. Everything else, whether it's ethics or theology, those are not genuine sources of knowledge. Now, such pronouncements, these authors point out, express something called scientism, not science, scientism. So scientism is claiming about knowledge that science is the only way you get to know reality. So especially the hard sciences like physics and biology, that's our only sources of knowledge about the world. Now, things like philosophy and history and literature and theology, they give us opinions about reality, but they don't give us knowledge. So they said that's a huge idea today in our world. I'll only believe it if it can be scientifically proven. Well, but as they point out, scientism is not science. Science is trying to explain natural phenomena. Nothing wrong with that. Christianity and science have a good friendship over the years. But it says today people confuse science with scientism. Science looks at natural phenomena. Miracles are by definition supernatural occurrences, so they're beyond the domain of science. So the conflict that we have is not Christianity versus science, it's Christianity versus scientism. So scientism seems to suggest that the only things in existence that we can study is all that is around us. So that's called naturalism. Carl Sagan said that when he said the universe is all that is or ever was or ever will be. So naturalism dismisses the miraculous. Why? Because they don't see anything that exists beyond what you can put in a test tube or weigh or measure. So scientism is not a really good theory of knowledge, and they come up with several reasons why. Scientism actually undercuts the scientific enterprise because science, to operate, depends on a lot of assumptions that you really can't prove. Like there's a real world out there to investigate. There's such a thing as truth. The fairness is important. Integrity is important. Honesty is useful. That there are genuine moral values like that, but you can't know that via science. There's also a problem with things that we know are true that scientism can't account for. So we know things like goodness and beauty, or we say things like, I'm thinking about lunch. Now, you may know that's true, but you can't know that scientifically. How about this one? Torturing babies for fun is wrong. Now, can you find that in a test tube? Can you prove that in a test tube? No. But do you feel that that's true? Sure. So there are things that we can know to be true that scientism can't account for. But here's the biggest problem that they point out with scientism. It's self-refuting. So what does that mean, self-refuting, when a statement undercuts itself? So somebody walks up to you and says, I cannot speak a word of English. You know that that person just destroyed his or her point because they did speak a sentence in English. So think about the claim that scientism says, all true knowledge comes via science. How do you prove that scientifically? You can't put that in a test tube. That's a philosophical claim that's made outside of science. So it said once you see that scientism falls apart, naturalism loses its greatest support. And there is evidence for God's existence. And any evidence that supports God's existence is therefore a shot against naturalism, isn't it? So wrap up in this chapter here as it comes to an end. There's no good reason to think science is in conflict with miracles, much less to think that miracles should be rejected because of science. He said many Christians just don't know how to think about miracles. So people think, oh, it's a violation of the laws of nature. No, a better definition is an event that is performed supernaturally beyond the ability of the natural world. So we didn't break the law of gravity when we grabbed a vase or something that was falling. The laws that are out there are just our best description of how the world behaves in the absence of any interference. Okay, then at the very end of the chapter, I like this. They have two sections here. One's called assignments, things to maybe consider and answer, and then suggested readings. So, for example, I love this assignment. Strike up a conversation with a skeptic about the definition of a miracle. Pay attention to how presuppositions shape one's understanding. Ask how, if he or she were to accept the possibility of miracles, would this impact his or her openness to the possibility of Jesus' resurrection? Then there's some other questions here. I won't get into them, but at the very end, a suggested reading list. Guyvet and Habermas are editors of a book called In Defense of Miracles. A man named Goetz, Goetz, has written a book on naturalism. A man named Larmer, Larmer, Legitimacy of Miracle. And then C.S. Lewis has a book, Miracles. So that's a chapter in the book here. It's not the easiest book to read, But that's fine. I mean, we need some books to stretch us a little bit, and this one will do that. So again, the title is Stand Firm. Excellent book. Well, thank you so much for being part of our podcast. We'll do another one soon.